Remember 2 weeks ago, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi made a remark during a meeting with EU foreign policy chief in Brussels. I remember it's July 2nd. That's when the meeting took place. But Wang's remark shocked the world and caused widespread speculation. And he said, the Chinese government cannot afford for Russia to lose in Ukraine because China fears that the US would then turn its full strategic focus onto Beijing. This unusually candid statement marked a dramatic departure from Beijing's previous position, which had been strategically vague to maintain the illusion of neutrality. Now, his comment exposed CCP's real strategy, which is to prolong the war in Ukraine in hopes of diverting US strategic resources and attention toward Europe. So Wang's blunt admission left many China analysts and international observers baffled. Why such honesty? That's rare among CCP officials. Unable to explain his motives, some dismissed it as a diplomatic blunder. Others speculated that Wang had defected to the anti-Xi camp and was motivated to distance himself from Xi Jinping and his policy. After all, exposing Xi's plan could be the first step. But the truth is far from what it appears. It's far more complex than most people assume. So on July 12th, Chinese dissident and law professor Yuan Hongbin revealed the entire backstory on social media. So the incident began in late May. A Chinese official working in a sensitive department within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs had a serious confrontation or issue or fallout with his boss. Out of frustration and possibly fear, he fled to Russia with the wife of his boss, and they sought political asylum. Why the boss's wife? Well, we don't know, but the defection sounds like it's linked to a romantic affair. But anyways, to prove his value, the defecting official handed the Russians a top secret CCP document. The contents outline Beijing's contingency plan in the event of a Russian defeat in Ukraine and the potential collapse of the Putin regime. So according to Professor Yuan's sources, the plan was based on a core assumption, CCP's assumption. If Putin's government were to fall, the US and Europe would act swiftly to support a pro-West political force in Moscow and reshape Russia's geopolitical alignment. In response, and under Xi Jinping's strategic directives, the CCP prepared solutions for two scenarios. Scenario number one involved supporting the Communist Party of Russia or a multi-party coalition led by the Communist Party to retain control of Russia and guide post-collapse Russian politics or post-Putin Russian politics. The goal was to take advantage of the chaos in the post-Putin era to restore a base for the international communist movement in Europe. And this is plan number one. Plan number two, or scenario number two, will be triggered if Western powers proved too dominant for scenario one to succeed. And in that case, if the West managed to install a pro-West government in Moscow, the CCP would aim to split the country. Beijing would back the Communist Party of Russia and its allies in establishing an Eastern Russian Federation east of the Ural Mountains. And at the same time, China would deploy troops to secure the vast region from the Urals to the Pacific, essentially Siberia. So Beijing wants to use military force to split Russia and build a vassal state in eastern Russia. This will allow Beijing to gain strategic depth and securing vital energy reserves in preparation for a future Taiwan Strait conflict. So to summarize, CCP's plans or Xi Jinping's plans are one, to revive a communist regime in Russia, or two, to use force to divide Russia and establish a communist Russian state east of the Urals. And this, in essence, was the content of the confidential document handed to Moscow by the defector. This strategy or plan amounted to a betrayal because it's a plan to stab Russia in the back if things fell apart or if things fall apart. So how did Putin respond? Well, according to Professor Yuan, rumors swirled in Beijing's political circles that by mid-June, Russia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs had already returned the defecting Chinese official to Beijing, along with the wife of his boss, who had fled with him. And along with the two individuals, Russia also delivered a diplomatic note to Beijing, and it reportedly contained only one chilling message. It says, Russia is an unshakable power and will remain so. That strength is safeguarded by nuclear weapons capable of destroying any potential adversary. So what do you think? The statement delivered to Beijing by Russia amounts to a nuclear threat. Putin was clearly angry. But then why did he return the two Chinese defectors to Beijing? Because he wanted to use the incident as leverage to strike a deal that would serve his interests. Wang Yi's statement in Europe may have been part of that deal. So according to CCP insiders, the defection triggered massive panic within the CCP leadership. In response, the CCP is now scrambling to finalize a secret strategic agreement with Russia, intended to be signed during Putin's scheduled visit to Beijing for the September 3rd military parade to commemorate the victory of World War II. So Xi Jinping's greatest fear is that the betrayal revealed in the defector's document could push Putin to abandon the Sino-Russian alliance and pivot toward the United States and Donald Trump. At this point, Xi Jinping's authority within the party is under serious challenge. He lacks leverage and cannot afford to lose Putin, both as a friend and as a strategic ally. It was precisely this fear that drove Wang Yi, under Xi Jinping's direct orders, to make such a revealing statement in Brussels, effectively discarding China's diplomatic facade on the world stage. Now, from Putin's perspective, cutting ties with China would be self-defeating. He still depends heavily on Beijing for military and financial aid in his war effort. So rather than escalating tensions, Putin used the defection or the defection incident to demand more support, and Beijing had no choice but to comply. I mean, Xi Jinping, I should say Xi Jinping had no choice but to comply, given the predicament he's in now. The proposed strategic agreement would formalize China's full spectrum support for Russia's geopolitical ambitions in Europe, including assistance in restoring the former Soviet Union's territorial footprint, namely reclaiming all of Ukraine and the 3 Baltic states. In return, Russia would agree to provide China with strategic depth and energy security in the event of a conflict over Taiwan. Additionally, Russia would help China establish underwater nuclear submarine launch sites in the Arctic to deter the United States. Moscow would also commit to applying military pressure on Japan to weaken its resolve and ability to intervene in the event something happens in the Taiwan Strait. So when Wang Yi declared that CCP cannot afford for Russia to lose, he was not just offering an assessment, he was sending a message. He was telling the world in no uncertain terms that the CCP intends to support Russia to the bitter end and prolong the war in Ukraine in order to wear down U.S. strategic capacity. On the surface, his remark appeared to be directed at an EU official, but in truth, it was a pledge to Putin, right? A plea wrapped in loyalty. Otherwise, how could Wang Yi so openly discard CCP's long cultivated image as a peace-loving mediator? Unless, of course, it was part of the price Beijing had to pay. That the mask of a peace-loving mediator is off, not by accident, by demand from Putin. If you look at whether it's the document handed to Russia by the defecting Chinese diplomat or Wang Yi's public statement, aimed at earning Putin's forgiveness, whether it's supporting Russia's continued invasion of Ukraine to divert America's attention and resources, or planning to back the Russian Communist Party in establishing a puppet regime if the Putin regime collapses. These strategies all lead back to a single goal, which is expanding the CCP's global communist sphere of influence. The CCP is actively preparing to take advantage of a weakened Russia after the war. It wants to repeat what Russia once did to China a century ago. In the early 1900s, the Russian Soviets helped establish the Chinese Communist Party. Now, the CCP wants to return the favor by helping the Russian Communist Party regain power. And this idea bears Xi Jinping's fingerprints all over. Since 2017, Xi has taken it upon himself to revive the global communist movement. And he has positioned himself as the movement's savior. China never truly sees Russia as a trusted partner either. Putin has never viewed Xi Jinping as a reliable buddy. The two are using each other to navigate their respective predicaments at the moment. So this leaked Chinese strategy has only reinforced one conclusion for Putin. He cannot afford to lose this war. If he does, Russia's real nightmare begins not from the West, but from Beijing stabbing him in the back. And that's more detrimental than what the West would do. So at the same time, Putin understands that Xi Jinping needs him right now in his internal political struggle. If Putin props up Xi, he secures China's continued support. But if he lets Xi fall, so goes China's aid. So it's very clear that he's going to support Xi Jinping to help him stay in power. At the same time, he isn't backing down from war. He isn't ready for peace talk yet. Putin's entanglement with the Chinese has prevented him from negotiating peace. That's my opinion. I hope the Trump administration sees this clearly. It's not Putin, it's the Chinese behind him that's making everything unnecessarily difficult and complex.